What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another critter format video. And in this video, I'm going to revisit the hand control deck that I showed off from a while back, because I think that deck had some major flaws, and hopefully I've managed to iron them out a little bit here. Now, I might not have made, sweeping changes to the deck or the overall philosophy of the deck, but I think that I made some improvements that just help it out overall. But before I dive in to those improvements and show off a game showing how the deck plays now, if you enjoy seeing these critter format videos or other format videos like Yugi Kaiba, then please consider subscribing to my channel. We recently hit 200 subscribers, which is really, really awesome. I'm really grateful that I have so many great subscribers, and 200 is really big for me. Next milestone would be 250, quarter of the way to 1,000, which would be really awesome to reach at some point. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who subscribed to reach that 200 goal, as that means a lot. Let's try and reach 250 next. And if you like the video, as always, please give it a like as well. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's dive into the differences between this version of the hand control deck and the last version that I showed off on my channel. So honestly, the differences aren't too big. The major changes that I made were cutting the third Magician of Faith and cutting a White Magical Hat, both of which I found to be kind of bricky in the wrong scenarios. Like, if you draw Magician of Faith too early in the game when you don't have powerful spells in the graveyard, it can be a lot worse. And White Magical Hat is great if you have ways to clear away your opponent's monsters to enable it to get in, but it is kind of fragile, and it dying to Trap Hole makes it a lot worse than something like a Masked Sorcerer, which you can just bring out, tack in for 900, and draw a card. So White Magical Hat's a bit more fragile, so I've put it at one copy that we can use when we actually want it, and we can also make sure that we aren't going to be bricking on this thing, as it isn't really the best on its own. In addition, we also cut a Last Will as well, and this freed up 3 slots in our deck, so we added a Giant Soldier of Stone and 2 Swords of Revealing Light. I think Swords of Revealing Light is a very, very good card, and it should be probably included in pretty much every deck. Just buying that time to draw into more cards is just very, very important. And yes, Heavy exists in the format and can clear Swords of Revealing Light, but even so, this card is just insanely strong and should be included in most decks. So I put these in. I think they help the deck a lot. And I also added the Giant Soldier because I figured that having more defenders paired very well with Robbin Goblin. Because if your opponent attacks into a defender and you flip up Robbin Goblin and they take damage from that attack, then they will be forced to discard a card from their hand. So we figured that adding a third defender is very nice here. However, I could definitely see including the Last Will over the Giant Soldier of Stone instead, as Last Will can fetch Giant Soldier of Stone if you really want it. However, I also found in playing this deck that I was often struggling to actually find a monster, and Last Will on its own without a monster can be really rough because you have no way to trigger it. That's why I chose to go for the third Giant Soldier here instead. But those are the changes from the deck that I featured last time. So now let's dive into what this deck actually does. If you missed my last video, basically the goal of this deck is to use things like Robbin Goblin and White Magical Hat to discard cards from your opponent's hand. Now, in the previous build of this deck, it was going a bit harder on the hand control than this version is. This version only has 3 real ways of discarding, and also less ways to bring out White Magical Hat on the field. Last Will was very useful in doing that. So honestly, this deck is kind of just a masked control deck with some Robbin Goblins thrown in. And I think that is sort of what the optimal version of hand control looks like, although I haven't tried out the Jinzo number 7 variant. Masked control is just such a powerful control strategy in this format that if you're playing a control package anyways, like, you might as well include Masked Sorcerer, which just turns the deck basically into Masked Control anyways. So I think that Masked Control can cover a wide variety of decks, and the version that we're looking at here is more focused on hand control, so I'm just calling it hand control. For the specific cards, we've of course got 2 Mass Sorcerer because this is basically a mass control deck. Just an insanely good card, and if you do manage to pull off its effect as well as Robbin Goblin, then you can go basically +2 because you're drawing a card and your opponent's discarding a card at the same time, which can just be insane. We also have a white magical hat to act as a discard tool as well. We've got 2 Sangan, 2 Witch to search out pretty much every monster in our deck, depending on what the situation calls for. We've got 2 Magician of Faith to cycle our very, very powerful spells, which we'll get to in a second. We've got a Cannon Soldier to potentially close out games. And we've got 3 Giant Soldier of Stone, 3 Lodge-In. The Lodge-Ins can let us go a bit more aggressive, and these Soldiers of Stone can let us go a bit more defensive, and both can pair well with a Robbin Goblin. For the spells, we're of course playing the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, all just insanely, insanely strong. We're playing 3 Fisher to act as more removal, to clear the way for our monsters like White Magical Hat and Mass Sorcerer to get in for damage. We're playing 2 Heavy Storm, which is just great at clearing the way for your monsters to attack in. And lastly, we're playing 2 Swords of Revealing Light, which I mentioned earlier I think is a very good inclusion in the deck. Buys you time to draw into what you need to deal with your opponent's boards. For the traps, we've got a Mirror Force because this is one of the craziest traps in the format if you actually manage to get it to resolve. We've got 2 Robbin Goblin, which I've mentioned throughout this deck breakdown as it's kind of the core of the deck. Unfortunately, you can't actually search this out, so that's why we're playing 2 to make sure we draw it more consistently. And if we were playing 3, it would be a bit of a brick, so we only have the 2 copies. But this can be insanely strong if you manage to resolve its effect. Discarding powerful cards from your opponent's hand is very, very good. To protect our Robbin Goblins and just be a very good control trap in general, we have 3 Solemn Judgment. And to act as removal on our opponent's turn, we have 3 Trap Hole, which can be very good at just protecting a Mass Sorcerer or White Magical Hat that you want to stick on the field. And we also have 3 Waboku, which is great at protecting your monsters, your life points, and also preventing the effects of things like White Magical Hat and Mass Sorcerer from actually being able to activate. For the side deck, we've got 3 Jiraigumo to side into a bit more of an aggro strategy. We've got 3 Man-Eater Bug if we need the extra removal. We've got a singular Mask of Darkness. I'm not sure if this is really necessary. I might cut it from the side deck in the future. But I think I was experimenting with this a little bit because if your opponent heavy storms a Robbin Goblin and you don't have another, the Mask of Darkness can get that back, but I'm not really sure how good that is. It's in the side deck if you want to go into it, though. We have 3 Princess of Tsurugi for more back row focused decks. This can be great at just dealing a ton of burn damage. We have 3 7-colored fish if we want to get a bit more aggressive, just like with the Jiraigumos. And we have 2 card destructions to deal with Exodia. Now, our deck should be able to win against Exodia if they are doing that, because we do have a fair amount of discard cards here. But card destruction is a good backup in case our opponent deals with the discard tools that we have. And that's the new version of the deck. Again, like I said before, not too much has changed, but I think it makes a very big difference in practice. So let's dive into some games and see what I mean. Okay, we've got a game against Deo Zomph here, who's been on the channel quite a bit. Very fun duelist to play against. So let's see how we do. We do manage to win the rock, paper, scissors, so we're going to go first. And we're on hand control. They're on something we don't know yet, but let's see what we get. This is a really good opening hand. We have a lot of different options here for what to do. We can just set a Giant Soldier of Stone, trusting that they won't be able to get over it. We could set a Mass Sorcerer with a Waboku. If they summon out like a Lodge-In, we could Fisher it away, and Waboku to protect our Mass Sorcerer. We could also just set the Solemn early, although it's not quite the best to set Solemn early because paying half your life points early in the game can be pretty rough. So we're going to think about it a bit, and we're just going to set the Giant Soldier, set the Waboku, and pass. It's unlikely they'll be able to get over the Giant Soldier, but the Waboku is a pretty good trap to have on the field anyways, so might as well set it. They're just going to set 2 of their own and pass back to us, and we're going to think about this a bit because we're not sure what their set is. But we're going to make the aggressive play here. We're going to bring out Lodge-In and hope to get over that. So we're going to attack in. It's a Sangan, so they'll be able to get something to their hand. And we could set something here. We could set like a Solemn Judgment in case they have like a Dark Hole or something, because that would be pretty bad for us. but that does play into heavy a bit, so we're going to just pass back to them. We have the Boku if they do clear our board, and if they do, we could always just summon out Mass Sorcerer, Fisher away whatever they have, and try and draw an extra card. So they bring out Jirai Gumo, which means they're probably on a bit more of an aggressive strategy, and they're not actually going to attack, because I think they don't want to risk half their life points here, and they figure Jirai Gumo is a good enough wall to stall us for a bit. Cannon Soldier is a good draw for later, especially if they do lose some Jirai Gumo coin flips. But what we're going to do is we're just going to bring out Mass Sorcerer, Fisher away their Jirai Gumo, and try and get in for damage, hoping that they don't have a Mirror Force. Looks like they don't, so we will be able to get in for 2700 and draw a card with Mass Sorcerer. And it's another Lodgin, which is nice to see. Since they have 2 back row here, we could feel more comfortable setting another, and we are just going to do that. We're going to set a Mirror Force. They're going to bring out a Witch, and they're going to try attacking into the Mass Sorcerer. We're just going to Uboku this, because we can get over the Witch next turn, probably, and then attack in with Mass Sorcerer for more cards. So we're just going to go for that. Unfortunately, they do Tribute to the Doomed here to get rid of our Mass Sorcerer. Oh, they're getting rid of Lodgin. Okay, we still have a way to get over the Witch then. And now we have another way to get over the Witch as well. We're going to bring out the Lodgin. They do trap hole that, but we're going to flip up Giant Soldier and try and get in that way. And that does clear the Witch. So they're going to add Thunder Dragon to hand just to, get discard fodder, I guess, because they are on Tribute to the Doomed. So it's likely they're on some other discard cards as well. And they're going to take 900 from that. We're going to draw a card. And we're just going to pass back to them. We're pretty confident that that set that they have isn't heavy. So we're pretty comfortable just leaving the Mirror Force here. Maybe we should set the Solemn Judgment in case they're set to Solemn Judgment as well. But if they do use a Solemn Judgment, they'll drop down to 2100. And with Cannon Soldier, we're likely able to kill them from that position. They're going to Thunder Dragon here, get 2 Thunder Dragons to hand. And they're going to bring out another Jirai Gumo. And this time they are going to attack. And they're going to call heads. And we could Mirror Force this, and I think we're debating it. But we do have a Fisher. So we could just save the Mirror Force, Fisher their Jirai Gumo, and then try and get in for damage next turn, which I think might be the way to go. Okay, we are going to Mirror Force. That will eat a Solemn Judgment. So we're honestly pretty happy with that because we're in a very good spot to potentially win next turn. We're going to bring out Sangan, and they're going to think about that, but it's ultimately fine. And we're going to Fisher. So they Solemn down to 1050. But honestly, this is really good because we've got Cannon Soldier for the next turn, which can basically kill them. Now, I think we should have switched Mass Sorcerer to defense here. I just forgot to do that, but it would have saved some life points potentially. But maybe it baits them into attacking a bit more. And they're just, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered anyways because they're just going to double Tribute to the Doomed our board away. So we will be able to get a Sangan search. We do forget the Sangan search, but honestly, I think I don't think that matters. I mean, Sangan's mandatory, so it would have changed the draw here. But really, Cannon Soldier is what matters. And we're just going to set the Magician of Faith, pass back to them. They're going to set one, pass back to us. And we realize at this point, I think Spiral67, who's watching, pointed this out to me. And we try and sort of redo, get the Sangan search, and then redraw. Honestly, we win either way because we can just flip up the Magician of Faith, try and add back something. They're fine with that. We'll add back the Fisher. Fisher away their monster. Summon out Cannon Soldier. They will trap hole the Cannon Soldier, but we have this Solemn set, and so they admit defeat. So the 2 cards that we drew after the Sangan missed the search didn't actually end up mattering. It's good to remember Sangan is a mandatory search, and it can mess up the draws that you get afterwards, so it's always good to do that search. But we won that game pretty handily, even though we didn't really see any new stuff. I mean, we saw a Giant Soldier of Stone, which could have potentially been taking the place of one of the cards we took out. So there is that, and that Giant Soldier of Stone was very useful. But honestly, I think this game was won off the back of Mass Sorcerer, just enabling us to draw into even more cards. But let's see how game 2 goes. Let's see if we actually manage to discard a card from our opponent's hand this time. And White Magical Hat ain't a bad one. They're just going to set one pass back to us. We're just going to bring out the White Magical Hat. That will get Trap Hold, unfortunately. But we can just set this Waboku and pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Witch of the Black Forest, try and attack in, and that will succeed. We don't really care about losing 1100. We'll save the Waboku for a better situation. And we draw Robbin Goblin, so we could set the Giant Soldier, set Robbin Goblin, and just hope they don't have a heavy. If they do have heavy, we can chain Waboku to it. It might be a bit of a greedy play, but we're just going to do it because it's just so strong if we do actually manage to pull this off. They're going to Thunder Dragon here. Get 2 Thunder Dragons to their hand from their deck. And they have Tribute to the Doomed, so we won't actually be able to pull that off because they'll be able to clear the Giant Soldier. Kind of unfortunate. They're going to get in for 1100, and we have Fisher, but we don't really want to use it yet. We don't want to set another Solemn because we don't want to overcommit to the back row here. But they're going to get in for another 1100, and that Witch is putting in some work. Magician of Faith is a pretty good draw, but we don't actually have any spells in grave. So what we can actually do here is we can just Fisher their monster away, get a spell in the graveyard. They get a search, sure, but we can just set the Magician of Faith, set a Solemn in case they have like a Change of Heart or something, and then pass back. They're going to activate Swords. We'll just get a Fisher to hand, and we're honestly fine with that. They're going to bring out a 7-colored fish and attack into Magician of Faith. We'll just let it die because there's no real reason to Waboku yet. And they'll pass back to us. We draw a Mirror Force, which is pretty nice. And we can feel pretty comfortable setting that, as if they heavied here, they would be clearing 2 of their own back row. And we do have a Solemn as well to negate the heavy if we need it. So we're just going to set the Mirror Force. If they overcommit to the board and try getting in a ton of damage, we can Mirror Force them away. So we're feeling pretty good about that. They're just going to go directly to the battle phase and attack in. I think that's smart. There's no real reason for them to overcommit here. And they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Mass Sorcerer, which we're just going to set, and they'll pass back. They're going to attack in with the 7-colored fish. We're going to Waboku this just to protect the Mass Sorcerer, and they're going to set one and pass. Trap Hole's pretty good. We can now feel comfortable fishing away their 7-colored fish, setting a Trap Hole, and just Trap Holing whatever they try and bring out. They're going to bring out a Lodgin. We're just going to Trap Hole that. And they're going to actually Monster Reborn here. And we could Solemn Judgment this to negate it. But we could just use a Mirror Force to get rid of it instead. So I'm not really sure it's worth Solemning here. We are actually going to Solemn that. Okay, I think we're saving the Mirror Force for after we switch Mass Sorcerer to attack mode and get in for some damage next turn. They have a Solemn of their own, so unfortunately that Lodging will stick. And we are just going to Mirror Force that. We want to draw here. And Monster Reborn is a pretty great top deck. We can choose to get really aggressive here if we want to. Although that might play into something like a Mirror Force. We're just going to switch the Mass Sorcerer to attack. And we're just going to try and get in there. And hopefully rip a card out of their hand with Robbin Goblin. And we will successfully do this. So we will be able to discard Jiraigumo, which is a pretty great card to discard. And we draw Cannon Soldier, which is honestly one of the best cards for this situation because it pairs really well with Monster Reborn and their extremely low life points. We're just going to set a Waboku if they Heavy Storm to get rid of the Robbin Goblin. We've got the Waboku to protect our Mass Sorcerer. They're just going to bring out a Witch and Raigeki away our Mass Sorcerer. I think they're trying to get in a ton of damage here because we are very low. Oh yeah, they have Stimpack, so that will actually kill us if this connects. So we just gotta hope they don't have a Solemn Judgment here. And luckily it seems they don't. We're gonna think about this for a bit. We could Dark Hole their board away, Reborn out a Jiraigumo, and summon out a Mass Sorcerer, and that will be exact game. It's a bit iffy. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna Dark Hole, and they've got a Magic Jammer. It's kind of rough. But honestly, I think this is pretty good for us. We can now Reborn without fear. We can just Reborn the Gumo. And if we summon out another monster in addition to this, we can discard their entire hand away. They will get a Witch Search, but we've got 2 attacks, so both cards will get discarded. Now, we've got to keep in mind here that we are at extremely low life, so we don't necessarily want to get too aggressive here. Jiraiya will be dealing 400. Cannon Soldier can deal an additional 14 to drop them down to 1300. That isn't quite lethal because 2 tributes off the Cannon Soldier will just deplete them by 1,000 more. So what we actually do here is, since we can't get lethal, we want to get another tool in our arsenal. So we're going to get a Mass Sorcerer. And we're going to try and draw something to protect ourselves here. But this is a bit risky. I think I actually should have gone for the Cannon Soldier play here in retrospect. Because if I miss the Jiraiya flip, I'm going to drop down to 725. And I do miss the flip. Drop down to 725. Which means if they have like a Lodgin or a 7-colored fish, which they are playing both Lodgins and 7-colored fishes. So it's likely they have 4 cards in their deck that meet that criteria. Then I just lose here. To be fair, if I have Cannon Soldier out and they bring out a Jiraiya, I also lose. But there are more cards that kill me through Mass Sorcerer than there are through Cannon Soldier. So I think this was a mistake, even though we do get a draw here. I do get so this is a bit of greed. They do search, but both cards in their hand will get ripped away. And we do draw a Pot of Greed, which is a pretty good draw, so we might not be punished for our play here. Unfortunately, neither of those are trap cards, so neither of those are really useful here. So we just got to hope that they don't draw like a Lodgin or a 7-card fish. And they do. So they bring it out and attack in to the Mass Sorcerer. And that's the end of the game because we do take that full amount of damage. If we had had the Cannon Soldier, we would have actually won here because they would have drawn Lodgin. And even if they attacked over Cannon Soldier, we would have drawn Pot of Greed, which would have drawn us into Raigeki. So we could have cleared their board away and attacked in for game with Jiraiya. But, you know, mistakes are part of the game, right? And there were situations in which that board actually did win. And there are situations also where Mass Sorcerer could have won me the game where Cannon Soldier could have lost me the game. If they drew a Jiraiya there, summoned it out against the Cannon Soldier, it would have been better to dig deeper into my deck, searching for like a Woboku or something. But I think it was the greedy play, and we did get punished for it. So let's hope we don't make any mistakes like that in Game 3. We're going to, I think, keep the deck largely the same. We might have sided out of a White Magical Hat, maybe? Just because they've got a lot of big beaters, so White Magical Hat's a little bit more vulnerable. But I'm not quite sure. We might have also sided out of some Giant Soldier of Stone for the same reason. But I don't remember. We're going to set the Giant Soldier, set a Solemn, pass back to them. They're going to Pot of Greed, and that's fine by us. There's no reason for us to Solemn this. I mean, I guess there is, to deprive them of 2 more cards, but they've got 5 cards in hand, and we can get majorly punished for that. They're going to bring out a 7-colored fish, and man, I wish this set was Robbin Goblin, but unfortunately it's not. They're going to take 200, pass back to us, and that's a pretty good draw. We'll bring out the Witch, we'll fisher away their 7-colored fish, and I think I should actually switch Giant Soldier to attack and attack in, because we do have the Trap Hole to back it up, but I think I'm worried if they do heavy, I don't want to necessarily be forced into Solemn Judgmenting that, and potentially losing the Trap Hole. So I think that I'm just going to attack in for 11 here. But, you know, main phase 2, I do set the Trap Hole anyways. So I think given that I'm doing this, I should just switch the Giant Soldier to attack. But I don't. And maybe it will come back to bite us. They're going to Sword of the Light here. And we're just going to switch the Witch to defense, pass back. We're honestly not too worried about this board state. We're doing pretty good. Pot of Greed's a great draw. We're just going to Pot of Greed, draw 2 more. And just pass back to them. Honestly, we could have saved the Pot of Greed, as there's nothing we're really doing here. And if we draw heavy, I don't even think we're going to use it, because we've got 2 back row of our own, and that sort of just going to expire naturally eventually anyways. So we draw Mirror Force. We're not going to set it, because, again, heavy could be pretty bad for us. They're going to set 1, pass back to us, and we've got a ton of cards in hand. We're just going to bring out Lodgin, and we're just going to attack into one of their sets. We could switch our other monsters to attack and try attacking in more, but if they do have a Masked Sorcerer set, then we don't want to attack into that and cause them to draw a card. It's a Man-Eater bug, so we will lose our Giant Soldier, unfortunately. They're going to Change of Heart the Lodgin, flip up Sangan, and then bring out a Cannon Soldier. We're going to ask them if they're using priority on the effect, and they will, which is the smart thing to do. And we do have a trap hole here, but we're not going to use it because if we did, then they'd be down to one card, which we can get over, but we can get over their whole board anyways, and we've got Dark Hole in their hand if we want to use it, and that's a 2-for-1 trade. But if they did not use priority there, I think we definitely would have trap holed to prevent them from trading off the Lodgin in the future. But they're going to get through the Witch. We're going to search out a Masked Sorcerer, and they're going to attack him with the Sangan, pass back to us. And we've got Magician of Faith in hand, so we can probably get back Dark Hole later. So we're just going to Dark Hole the board away. Sure, they get a search with the Sangan, but if we can bring out a Masked Sorcerer, attack in for damage, draw a card, that's pretty good. We do manage to draw a card, and it's another Magician of Faith, which means that we can potentially get even more uses of Dark Hole if we want it. We also have a Pot of Greed in the graveyard too, so we can get that back if we want as well. We're just going to set Mirror Force because we do have Solemn to protect it if we need it. I mean, if they're set to Solemn as well, then this could be pretty rough because they heavy our board away. We activate Solemn to prevent it. They activate Solemn of their own, and then they get in for a ton of damage. But I think this is worth the risk. They're going to bring out a 7-card fish. We're just going to trap hole that away. And they're going to discard Thunder Dragon. So they likely drew Thunder Dragon for turn. And they're just going to set one, pass back to us. And I think we're pretty good with this board state. We're going to bring out a Sangan in case they have a Mirror Force. But then we're just going to attack in for 19. And we'll get to draw another card with Masked Sorcerer. We're going to set a Swords. They're going to Dark Hole the board away, which isn't even the worst for us because we do get to search here. So we're just going to search out another Masked Sorcerer because it's been serving us pretty well so far. They're just going to set one, set another, pass back to us. And I guess we didn't side out the White Magical Hat. We do still have the White Magical Hat in. We're going to bring out a Lodgin, and it will get trap hold, unfortunately. We're going to think about this because we could Monster Reborn to get it back and try attacking in. And it looks like that's what we're going to do. They're going to Solemn the Monster Reborn, and we're really fine with that. We're feeling very good. 1950 is a point where we could potentially just like clear their board away, bring out Lodgin, attack in, and get them down to a very close to lethal range. They're going to bring out a Jirai Gumo, flip up the Witch, and attack in. And I think this is prime Mirror Forcing material, so we're just going to Mirror Force. They're going to Solemn Judgment, but we're going to Solemn Judgment in response to that. Because, you know, we might as well. They don't really have a follow-up, and this could potentially just be the end of the game coming up here. Because they're going to take 975 from the Solemn Judgment. So if we actually do manage to connect with Lodgin, then we just win. And we do just win here. We're going to bring out Cannon Soldier and attack in for game. So games 1 and 3 didn't really show off the hand control side of things. It mainly just showed off the mask control side of things. But honestly, this deck is basically mask control with a bit of hand control flavor. And I think that's the optimal version of hand control. One of the issues with hand control is that, first of all, White Magical Hat dies to Trap Hole, which is extremely unfortunate if it happens. But also that if you do manage to discard your opponent's entire hand and put them into top deck mode, that's really good. But, you know, you can't really get any more advantage after that, right? If they empty their hand, you can't discard anymore. So you're not gaining advantage from the package. Masked Sorcerer, on the other hand, lets you constantly gain advantage throughout the game, no matter how many cards your opponent has in hand. So it's very, very useful. And I think that Masked Sorcerer is a much more reliable card to build your deck around because of that. It also gets under Trap Hole, which is extremely useful, as you saw here. That being said, I do think Robbin Goblin is a very, very good card to include in a variety of decks. As I said, discarding a card from your opponent's hand is extremely good, and I think a lot of decks can support Robbin Goblin. Yes, it does lose to Heavy Storm, but, I mean, if you manage to pull off the effect even once, it can be incredibly good. All that being said, while I think this version of the deck is the one that I like the best, I will be trying out the sort of Jinzo number 7 variant of it in the future. I think that Koff had a really cool list, and I might try out Koff's list. I might make some changes before I try it out, but I think it is well worth trying. So I'm going to try and show that off in the future as well. But I hope you enjoyed this video as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.